H. P. Blavatsky corresponded with Ralston Skinner. 6 letters and a photograph that he received from her are in a collection at Harvard University. The longest letter is presented now. Ostende, February 17th, 1887. My dear Mr. Skinner, many sincere thanks for your most valuable manuscript. I gave it to be bound immediately after part glancing over it, for I desire to study it seriously. From your long letter, however, and what I could gather superficially from the manuscript and the source of measure, I feel convinced, nay, I know it. You have discovered a key to the universal language. You have done more than any living man, since the fathers of the Church have designedly hidden and lost it. But pardon me, dear Mr. Skinner, do not think me presumptuous or ignorant or one-sided if I tell you that which I can prove. You have discovered a key, but it is one of the 7 keys I mention in Isis Unveiled. Of course, when made to face your clear, systematic, mathematically correct writings, my Isis, which I wrote in perfect ignorance even of the English language of the tune, cannot impress such an accurate writer as yourself with any of its statements. The things I give there are facts, and of those 7 keys to the esoteric philosophy and the universal language you have discovered 1, nay 2, but you seem to scorn entirely its first key, the one which opens the metaphysical and abstract portion of the philosophy, the paradigms of all things, the divine spiritual models of its physic, logical and astronomical aspects. For all them are linked together, and if you hold only to the later Jewish texts remodeled by the Esdras and company to fit in with the universal geometrical ideas, the Egyptian among others, you will not unlock the others. Now I am a perfect ignoramus in mathematics or geometry or a science. I know only the outward form of symbols, the geometrical and numerical forms I mean, for I have studied occultism and esotericism practically, for practical use, not theoretically. That is when I see a certain symbol of the mineral kingdom, say, at a glance its relation to the vegetal, animal and human or psychic realm. I know what a fetus, as in the Palenque carvings, relates to, and that every stroke, every figure repeated on a tablet related in its numeration not only to the lunar months, periods, and divisions, as in its bearings upon the mystery of generation, but also to the cosmogony, the theology, the hierarchy of the builders, or the constructive Tian Johans, the masons of our manvanteric world, who are in the collect work the master mason or demiurgus, and I know also to what object in the physical world and what forces in the nominal world each of the 49 weeks of gestation of the primitive man or child in the lunar egg corresponds to. It will puzzle you, but it is Eastern esotericism. You take up physiology, female periods, quickening, gestation, etc., from the last races of the fourth Atlantean race, we take it up from the second and third races and begin with sexless, then bisexual or hermaphrodite, and finally male and female separated at the beginning of the fourth root race. And if we're opposed, we ask, how came first man on earth? The profanes stand on two paths of speculation: the theological, Adam made of earth, a human clay figure into which God breathed the breath of life; and the Darwinian, materialistic, man evolved to its present form from lower animals. The anthropoid, ape, and he having one common ancestor. We answer to the latter with those sticks. It is the pithecoid animal, the gorilla, the orang, the chimpanzee, who are the descendants of the Atlantean giants. But all they will be in my secret doctrine, and you will judge. For the present I will only say for you your information that our esoteric science shows the appearance of descent of man thus: first root race, sexless, was composed of the shadows, the astral projections evolved from themselves by the creators, the Tian Chahans or lunar Pitris, the progenitors and ancestors of man in Hindu exoteric religion. Second race, the sons of will yoga, so-called hermaphrodites, ethereal, boneless, whose progeny were called the sweat-born because of the process as described, the hermaphrodites oozing out the perspiration which formed into an egg, in which man, like Brahma, or the universe in his golden egg, gestated under the influence of the moon and was born as reptiles and birds too. Then the third race, the one of the fall, separated owing to the law of natural evolution, by beginning to be born as men and women, children of two sexes instead of hermaphrodites. Then, at the end of the third root race, the giants with soft bones fell anew by following the example of animals and began mating. Your Adam Kadmon became Jehovah, Cain, Cain and Abel, finally Enoch, the son of Seth, the first race from which there more were born the men of the fourth, the Atlantean, or the giants with bones, the Titans, and those of whom the sixth chapter Genesis speaks as the sons of God, daughters of man, whose progeny were giants and mighty men of old. All this is found in the allegories of the Puranas, but is given scientifically or without any fables or additions in the books of Dhyan or wisdom of the esoteric philosophy. This will be regarded, as I proclaimed, nonsense by both believers in the Jewish chronology of 7,000 years since the world's creation and by geologists and biologists who know only of man as he is now, and dare not assign antiquity to the human race beyond some 100,000 years. But Eastern or Aryan teaches us, as based upon zodiacal records, that 1. At the beginning of cosmic evolution, up to the Hindu year Tirana, the number of years elapsed is 1,955,884,686. 2. The mineral, vegetal, and animal lower kingdom up to man have taken to evolution 300 million years. 3. Time from the first appearance of humanity on our planetary chain, see Sinet's esoteric Buddhism, equals 1,645,500,887 years. 4. The number of years that elapsed since the Vaivasvata Manvantara, or our Aryan Adam, that is, man in the present human form after the deluge, which is a cosmic, astronomical, and geological cataclysm, not simply a flood, to the present year, is just 18,618,728 years. Of other periods we need not speak now. Thus you see that assigning 18 or 19 million years, or the time for the physiological evolution of man from the ethereal, sexless, bisexual, man and woman races, there was ample time for him, man, to become as he is now, and except in size, never to alter much since 859,000 years ago, when the first Atlanteans were swept away and down into the seas. The geologists and anthropologists may be searching for the missing link till doomsday. They will not find it except, as said before, giant skeleton, perchance. Your 3 degrees of masonry are certainly the only ones to be taken into consideration. The Jains have only 3, the Brahmins 3 chief and 3 collateral degrees. And now I will answer all your points. The 500 words in common, Hebrew and Egyptian, do not surprise me, but that which does is Seyfarth's idea that Coptic is a derivative of the Hebrew. Pardon me. But the Hebrew is not only a dead language, virtually. The Hebrew, I mean the language of Moses, which he has got and brought from the Egyptian sanctuary, exists no more. It is not found in any existing record save perhaps with the Kali Jews, the black Jews of Cochin, who know nothing of the Babylonian capture of the 12 tribes, knowing only of 2, the Judah and Levi tribes, the warriors and sacerdotal, for they have come to India about 700 BC. They never moved from their place. They have their laws of Moses and no Genesis. That language was thoroughly lost during the captivity and preserved partially only by some Levites. The Ezra Hebrew is a hybrid language already much tinged with Chaldean. The Hebrew square letters cannot be traced even to the day of Ezra's 458 BC. That they have been adopted from the Babylonian is quite true, but that they have received their final form in the first centuries of our era is also true. That these square letters have not existed before that captivity is shown by the absolute absence of any inscription in those characters among the thousands of different kinds found in the ruins of Chaldea. Not even a gem or a medal, nor have been ever found such in Egypt. Say what Seyfarth may, the square Hebrew character and the Hebrew in which the most ancient scrolls are written cannot be traced earlier than just before our era. Pentateuch has never been written as a whole by Moses or his God either. The oral traditions are his, but the many portions of Old Testament belong to different epochs and many writers, as you yourself know. These books have been lost and found, destroyed and rewritten about a dozen times since Moses, on the confession of the writers themselves. And if we accept Halkiah and his finding the Book of God, which was lost for centuries and entirely forgotten, we have to accept Esdras' infallible inspiration, and after him of all the other writers when his books were destroyed by Antiochus and others, etc., etc. The Talmudists had various readings of the Pentateuch, most strikingly different from our canonical texts. See Donaldson, Cholovich, Cody paraphrased Jonathan ben Uziel and the author of Chronological Orthodoxy. If we take into consideration the variations of the Hebrew texts and manuscripts, none of which can boast any great antiquity, the discrepancies between the Hebrew and Sumerian texts, the Greek versions, the evidences of different readings furnished by the Talmud, Targumim, and other rabbinical authorities, the change of the Hebrew character from the older Phoenician form to the square letters borrowed from the Syrians after Babylon captivity, then the Masorah Hamburg, the distinction between the medial and final letters, etc., etc. All this will prove that the present Hebrew text was accommodated to the Septuagint written in Greek at the whim of Ptolemy Philadelphus, and the Septuagint itself. Well then, we are told that the 10 tribes disappeared during the Babylonian captivity, 500 BC, and centuries later Ptolemy Philadelphus asks the high priest Eleazar to send him 6 men from each of the 12 tribes, and the high priest sends them. To summon from tribes that have disappeared centuries ago is funny, yet there is positive proof that the Septuagint was made in its measurements and esotericism to conform to the Egyptian astro-cosmic records of the Great Pyramid just during the reign of Ptolemy, and that, except as said before, a few books, real and genuine, of Moses with the coaching black Jews, the Jewish world had no reserved one single manuscript of the Pentateuch earlier than AD 300 and 400, of which the earliest manuscript now existing, the 11th century, may be tolerably correct copies. Why wonder then that the pyramid measurements dovetail so well with the measurements found in the Bible of the Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's Temple, etc. To begin with, Moses was an Egyptian initiate, then sorry and agree as were the Jews at the desecration of their holy books by the 70 writers. See Josephus. Yet when their lost Ezra scrolls come to disappear in their turn and were entirely lost, they were too glad to have copies even from the entirely Egyptianized and Greekified Septuagint, for lack of any other. But this would lead me too far. I could write volumes on it. I sent anyone who could contradict then statements to Dr. Prideaux, Dean of Norwich, Sacred Connection, Book 5, and Dr. Horner and his introduction to the Old Testament, to the confession and admissions of additions, alterations, interpretations, borrowing, etc., the whole being excused and justified on the plea that the various writers acted under the order of the Holy Ghost, that they were divinely inspired. Esoterism you find now in Hebrew Chaldaic texts is the esoterism of Egypt and Chaldean, not the genuine and original esoterism of the Hebrews, a small little tribe that derived its traditions, a portion of Egypto-Mosaic wisdom certainly, and accommodated texts of its sacred scrolls to the earlier doctrines of Chaldea and Egypt, while denouncing the pagan. The real Hebrew, that is, the sacerdotal language of the Levites and Moses, was the language of the priests of Egypt, but under another name, Neterkari, or the divine language, the sister of Devanagari, the divine speech, or the language of the gods of the Aryan Hindus, of the censor in old Devanagari characters, of the initiates of Central Asia. The Hebrew of existing scrolls is a later dialect, an invented variation that every Chaldee would understand, that the Hebrew of the descendants of Heber, that language that came beyond Euphrates and was yet spoken even in the days of Jeremiah 600 BC, was not the Chaldaic or the Syriac, as some persons now claim, is well proven by Bishop Walton's happy suggestion, who shows it in his Prolegomena 3:13 by drawing attention to verse 15, chapter 5 of Jeremiah, where the Chaldeans and Assyrians, whom God threatens to bring against Judea, are called an ancient nation, a strong nation whose language people of Israel knoweth not, neither do they understand their speech. The proof is unanswerable. Now do I deny the presence of esotericism and of the universal language, the one lip of the fourth race in the Old Testament? Never. I say it is there. And as you have shown, it is also in New Testament, and this proves that the initiates who wrote the Synoptics and St. John were of the same school of initiates as the Essenes, the Egyptians, the Greeks, especially as St. Paul was. That the history of Jesus is not his life or biography, not even the history of 3 or 4 years of his life, but simply the allegorical rendering of years of probation, initiation, trials, and final glorification of the initiate of any country, whether to be called Vishvakarma, Apollonius of Tyana, Osiris, Vitoba, or Salivana, or Jesus. What I say again is that while the Jews and early Christians remodeled or made their scripture to fit in with the original archaic tradition, the universal astrocosmic initiation by adapting it only to the astronomical, purely physiological, materialistic myths, they left the metaphysical, cosmic, and theological portions of it untouched. For pretending to modern theism, they would avoid the purely pagan philosophical views of the universe. They have done this in most ingenious and clever way imaginable, and have succeeded thereby to blind long series of generations into the idea that they, the Jews, were the chosen people of Jehovah, and Christians an improvement of the chosen people. But I say it again, they have, neither of them, given anything new or original whatever, in the real esoteric meaning, not to the Hindus at any rate, now the only people on earth who have preserved the original archaic doctrines. This takes nothing away from your independent discovery, which is of great importance to the world. Its greatest merit is for the Western world, since you have put it so clearly, in such scientific mathematical language, hence made your discovery and proofs inattackable. But all you say is known to Eastern occultism, and you may find more than one thing in Isis vague and hazy and put in my flapdoodle pidgin English. Still the spirit of it is there, but you have created a tangible, objective body for that which in my work may be regarded as a shadow or phantom of imagination. But if you add Eastern philosophy to your own independent research, you will have to give up your ideas of the holiness of the Hebrew Scrolls, about which you are so enthusiastic. The Jews have never and at no time been monotheists, not as the word is understood in the West, though they may have been, as some Hindu sects now, who choose their favorite god among the devils and make the rest subservient to that creature. The early Jews were pantheists as we are, and the later humbugs. The Gentiles were too philosophical to create unto themselves one personal anthropomorphic God and call him infinite, while showing his relation to men and things finite; to call him absolute, yet to make him concerned with conditioned subjects; nominal, perfect, eternal, yet subject to passions. All this is an absurdity in logic as in philosophy. You may consider me an atheist. I say I am not. I believe in a boundless, eternal, infinite, absolute principle, abstract to any limited understanding, in a causeless cause, a rootless root of all that exists, your circle, in short, as you defined it, and which no man can know. You call its diameter the One. So do we, but what you think of, or how you defined it finally, is not yet clear to me. But in Part 1 of my SD I give the various circles, differentiating from the first race to the last. Is a circle pre-cosmic aspect, a circle with a dot, at the dawn of Manvantara, a circle with a diameter, the first manifested cosmic plane, Mother Chaos or Nature appearing across the infinite circle at its reawakening, then and when the first race of mankind, collective Adam, was projected on the seven zones of the earth by the progenitors or Pitris from within themselves. It became a pentacle, a triangle, a line, a square, within and around the circle, because the seven hosts of the septenary had, by dedoubling themselves, as so to say, become 14. These seven septenary groups are called the 49 fires of life, of being, the divine spirit of the earth. You will find the same idea in divine Pymander or Hermes Trismegistus in his seven governors, and nature building or forming seven there simultaneously on the seven centers of the universe. Then the second race has the egg evolving and bisexual race following the sexless, which had evolved in its turn, the second race by dedoubling as their progenitors did, only men physical though still boneless. This egg business is hinted at by the Greek mythos of Leda and the swan and their progeny Castor and Pollux. Then the third race has in its beginning the glyph of the androgyne and ends by the phallic and yoni separation, where I get my authority from the book of Zen, Wisdom and Masters, in whom you have hitherto declared not to believe, only perhaps because they are living and mortal men. I'm curious to know what you make of the swastika within the circle, which became the sacred sign with the Atlanteans, and by being transformed into swastika minus its circle, thus became the first phallic sign of the accused materialistic race, the fourth, and of our own, the fifth. I make of it the Hebrew Aleph, the bull, the male aspect of the Hindu cow. Tell me if you believe me right or wrong. These are the most archaic signs and glyphs. From this point, swastika, henceforward, I leave you full sway. You have studied thoroughly and comprehend sexual symbols to perfection better than I do, for I am not for physiological but for the metaphysical. Thus, when you speak to me about the Egyptian Mut as connected with Jehovah and a causative of generation, I say you are right. In Egypt, the Theban triad was composed of Ammon, Mut or Muth, their son Honsu, their Deus Lunas, the moon god, but Mut means mother. See Chimbalion, Mospero, Mariette, etc., etc. Of course, she is also the moon in one aspect, or every mother goddess of Egypt as Isis, Hotter, Diana, etc., etc. She was, however, less the wife than the mother of Ammon, who was called his mother's husband, the root idea of Christianity, if you please. Jesus is identical with God or the Holy Spirit, being also his mother's husband and his grandmother Anne's husband too, gravely with the Catholic interpretation making Mary born without sin. The moon was everywhere except India, the Holy of Holies, the navis, the divine vessel holding in it the seed of being, and always male and female, the emblem of occult practical wisdom or sorcery in contradiction to abstract divine occultism. So it was with the Chaldeans. See Nabatean agriculture, Kutami taught by the moon and Saturn. Soma, the Hindu moon, is male. He seduces Tara, the wife of Brihaspati planet Jupiter, the guru of the gods, and has an illegitimate son by her. Buddha, physical brain wisdom, do not confuse it with Buddha, and Soma esoterically is causative of generation, the fructifier of and the symbol of the embryological cell containing the seed. Jehovah may well be connected with female Moth, since the Zohar he is Binah, the female Sephirot of the first triad. This you know, of course, better than I do. This is why perhaps Adam, the phallus too, is said in Maimonides' Morana to have been regarded as the prophet of the moon by some Semitic nations. By the way, the world has never known much, I believe, of Maimonides. Honsu was also called Joteph, and his aspect of thought's lunas, or he who operates salvation. When he wears on his brow the head of an ibis ending with the lunar disk and is crowned with a diadem called Joteph. There is a bronze statue of his in Bulak number 2068 of the Serapeum period. The phallic gods were always more lunar than solar, and the fact that Honsu, or rather Ammon, Mut, Honsu are of the Theban period, not of the Memphian, show its far later origin when phallicism became the root and soul of every symbol. The identity between the Holy of Holies of the Egyptians as the king's chamber and sarcophagus, mistaken by Professor Smith for a granary being at first, and of the Hebrews, is due again to the universality of the symbol. Only while with the Aryans the passage through the golden cow when an initiate became Vijay or twice born or a Brahmin, and with the Egyptians after the 3 nights and 3 days in the sarcophagus when the candidate became after resurrecting or emerging from it an hierophant was born anew has quite another meaning. At any rate, the meaning has been ever cosmical and purely spiritual with the Aryans and the early Egyptians, whereas the Jews have dragged it down entirely into matter. The golden cow, into which the Aryan stoops to this day, as you show in your instance, and enters it through the breast part to re-emerge through the natural parts on the other side, denotes a separation from the terrestrial matter and a spiritual birth or regeneration, for after then he becomes a yogi renouncing all, or an ascetic. This has nothing phallic in it, but the Jews alluded in that symbol simply and causally to the physiological sexual act. Their god was the phallus and the act divine, and the pit of sin was their holy of holies. This is why I say that they adopted one of the meanings, the latest, the phallic use, which shows their late origin, and that their religion evoluted or one of the last after all the others, Christianity being the only one later than Judaism, if we leave exoteric Muslim religion out of the question. For in truth it is not a religion but a Jewish sect with a prophet hooked onto it. Now I have no right to give out the secrets of Brahmanism, but if Subaru consents to it, I will show in the SD that this passage through the golden cow or spiritual abstract nature, the mother goddess which purifies, is by ages and ages older than the Jewish symbol, that the early Israelites took it from Chaldea, which had it from the Brahmins, who lived and had a school of Sanskrit in Babylonia ages before the said captivity. See what Colonel von Kennedy says, that the Jews were Indian Chandalas, brick makers, and the cunning workmen, which on account of their filthy habits were driven out of India 6 and 7 years ago, just about the time of their creation and Genesis is sure. Esoteric books can trace them step by step from various parts of India to Iran, on the shores of the Euphrates and towards Babylonia and Chaldea. In the Institutes of Manu, they are mentioned only as the lowest of the low. In the chronicles of Sankaracharya and the Advaitis, especially in the tablets of Agastya, the king and the saint, they are shown migrating finally west between 3 and 4000 BC. They had their castes of priestly hierarchy, the latter being called Brahma, non-Brahmin, in the esoteric writings of the temples. Just a coincidence or what that Abram becomes Abraham and means Abram, not Brahmin, low castes in Sanskrit. Baron Bunsen proved beyond doubt or cavil that between Abraham's time and Moses there is a period of between 3,000 and 4,000 years, just the time when the Adam and their history begins. Philologists and ethnologists may think and speculate till they are blue in the face. We know better. We know that Zoroastrians or modern Parsis, the Armenians and the Jews are all of one primitive stock, whether the one call themselves Aryan and the other Semites. The latter are or may be Semites through their shame, but surely not the Arabs, older by thousands and thousands years than the Jews, and who knew not of shame before. The Jews transformed the Assyrian Shamas into Noah and sons. The old books teach that the Jews are a hybrid race, as Dr. Wilder rightly thought, of Hamite, Caucasian, and Aryan Hindu races. They were outcasts and had lived long enough in India among the Aryans to learn esoteric wisdom. With regard to Vishnu, Matsya fish avatar and its identity with the Chaldean or Anus, the Chaldean man-fish, please see volume 2, Isis Unveiled, page 254. Dr. Bach must have it. De Collier is a French humbug in many a thing, but if you turn to the Theosophist, August 1881, page 138, you will find there Antiquity of the Vedas by Krishna Shastri Godbola, the good astronomer and mathematician who proves undeniably that the Vedas could not have existed less than 25,000 years. If you never read the article, read it, for it is all purely mathematical and astronomical and will interest you. It runs, I believe, seriously through 6 or 7 numbers of the Theosophist. By the way, in your source of measures there is a misprint. It is Aryabhata and not Argabhata on page 86. You must excuse my sincerity, but Bentley, whom you quote as an authority, is, or was rather, a great humbug. I can prove to you his malice and mistaken words. You say your Brahma Prajapati has the same phallic significance as Jehovah. Of course it has, and I never said Brahma was anything else, but then Brahma, male, is not Brahma, neutral, or Parabrahman. Brahma's name is not found in the Rig Veda, nor in any other Veda, but is a Latin name from brich, to spend, to grow, and increase. Hence phallic Brahma splits himself into 2 parts, male and female, or Vaj, and in Vaj The Aryan Eve, the mother of all that lives, he creates Viraj, who is the father of all men and living beings. Esoterically, it is precisely the same as Jehovah or Adam Kadmon, separating himself and becoming Adam Eve, and then creating in Eve Cain or himself Jehovah, even Jehovah. But this has reference to the beginning of the fourth race, as I said before. A proof of it is that, as Brahma's name is not in the Vedas, so their male symbol in the human sense has no more temples or worship in India. He is rejected and spurned. In his place remains the lingam, for more suggestive and grand, as the symbol of nature's spirit which vivifying all nature, yoni, than the pillow of Jacob, a purely human phallus. The three steps are the three steps or strides of Vishnu. Vishnu is one and Vishnu is three, and on the earth he is 5 and 7. Vishnu is from the root vish, to pervade, and being described as striding through the 7 regions of the universe in 3 steps. As a fire symbol, they mean flame, lighting of the sun, astronomically rising, noon, and setting of the sun. Anthropologically, the 3 evoluting races of humanity, after which Vishnu takes 5 and 7 strides, that is, it becomes 3 and 4. The male and female symbols phallic. Since I wrote to you last, I had permission to write upon such subjects which I have not dared to touch before in my letters. I know I can tell you that if you only get at the Hindu zodiac, its 12 signs, and you but know Sanskrit, they will reveal to you the whole evolution of cosmos, for they do represent this mystery surely. Only one has to be initiated in the secret reading of the mantras and their rhythmical melody, and of the Tantra Shastras, works on incantation and magic. Ahrens found musical notes in the Hebrew of the sacred scrolls. Why Aryan Hindu reading of the Vedas and Brahmanas is impossible, as for comprehension and effects go, without such musical notes. Hebrew has 22 letters and Sanskrit about 70, and many vowels, 16 signs, and their points of accentuation, all, and each a musical note. One who knows Aryan music could notate the whole letters and make of it another volume of archaic scripture on a vorte, or the songs without words of German musicians. Then again, the Hebrew has 22 letters and 22 numerals thrown out of the cipher. Sanskrit has thrice that number for consonants, and 16 numerical combinations for the vowels, and heaven knows how many more for the signs. Then there are 7 synonyms for every word in the ancient books, with their meaning besides the one used exoterically. There you have to find out the numerical value for all the letters of a certain word, and the same value of each syllable in that word, which value is different. Then you must permute these different syllables and examine the new combinations, and if the values and the letters correspond, then you have the right meaning. Now you have undeniably found out the real meaning of the cube, triangle, etc., etc., of the 4 and the 3, and that is refers to male and female, and the number of generation. This is on the terrestrial plane. Now take the perfect cube with the Sanskrit Aryans. You will find that besides their meaning, which exists only in exoterism, they represent it with the fourth sign of the zodiac, the Karkataka Cancer, because when the syllables are transmuted according to Mantra Shastra into their corresponding numerals, the musical notes become the four measured sounds. The lines eliminated therefore are four vertical lines, and that the word answering to it is Parabrahmataraka, or the seven result back into four matras, or the four states of mentality: waking, dreaming, deep sleeping, and death. Four states of human life also: childhood, adolescence, maturity, and old age, and so on and so on. This permutation alone of 3, 4, 7, and back again from the four states of Brahma to one aspect of Brahma, neutral, could fill a whole volume. I believe that the years or age of Jesus had, besides the connection you give to the sign of the zodiac, which of course is correct, also to the cycle of 33 years and 33 crores in India, and I will tell you why. The Hindus count 33 crores of gods, or 333 millions of deities, the personified qualities of the one Parabrahma, the Absolute. Now there were many attempts to prove the birth of Christ as professed since the world's creation astronomically, attempts made by Kepler and by Dr. Sepp, or also in the early days of Christianity. Repeating Kepler's idea, Dr. Sepp says that it was written in the stars, the signs of the zodiac, that the Messiah would appear in the lunar year of the world 4320, during the memorable year when the whole angelic choir of the planet would be singing his jubilee. Now this seems a very innocent hallucination of a Christian fanatic, if it has not been from the first a very malicious and cunning appropriation of a pagan mystic cycle. The Chaldees claimed 432,000 for their divine dynasties by the Saracens, and the Hindu have 4,320,000 as the duration of their Mahayuga. What could there be easier then than to veil themselves of the pagan figures and show the Gentiles exaggerating in line, and the Jewish chronology made triumphantly, reducing the figures to their utmost simplicity? Well, if they did not scruple to make of the Hindu 4,320,000 years cycle 4,320 years from the world's creation, why could they not avail themselves of the figures 33 likewise for the years of the Saviour? What you show is astronomically and mathematically correct. See what you could do of this. Thus I see a difference in our beliefs will amount to this: you believe in a creative power unified, a God. We believe in an absolute unity as noumenon, and in creators as its aspects, or heavenly men, who have evolved humanity phenomenally. I see you are a kind of transcendental theist. We are pantheists on this plane, and believers in one incognizable all. You see, to reject the Elohim as entities independent of the abstraction and call them a constant coefficient. Will we do so also? But we say that this constant coefficient is the known and living quantity put forward to the unknown quantity, the x. Please excuse me if I put it stupidly, for I say again I am jackass in mathematics and unable to put my thoughts in figures and symbols on your plane. But you understand my meaning. You are a great mathematician, and I pay you no compliment at all in saying that I thoroughly and sincerely regard you as an occult genius, some reincarnation of an Archimedes or of an Euclides, and it breaks my heart to think that with such genius as yours will not go beyond the Hebrew scrolls. If I could pass you what I know and add that knowledge to your mathematics, I would die happy, for I would leave then esoteric philosophy of the Theosophical Society in good hands. I know you will not be pleased with this letter, but what can I do? Notwithstanding my reputation, I am unable to flatter and lie, and have the bad habit of saying what I think to every man, woman, or child that I find on my way. Tibetan Rosaries. Well, every Hindu rosary has 108 beads answering to the 1008 names of Vishnu or Shiva or any other god. I am writing to India for some rosaries for you. Dr. Buck ought to write to Olcott to see to that, and he will do it quicker in such case. I had lots of such charm and amulets, but left all at Adyar. What would you make of this? I have drawn it crooked, but you may have an idea. It is a bronze holy of holies from Tibet with a will prayer on it. Around the letter or the figure are flames which I have made to look like unkempt curls. Have you any idea what it may be? Now do let me have your photograph, and I will see what I can do. But remember, I am very sick, and my living or being still alive is simply cheating nature for the benefit of the Theosophist. I might be dead 2 or 3 years ago. I see I have made a mess of your pie business. I did not mean by what I saw that the pie value could be any other in India or China exoterically or esoterically. As well say that in esotericism 2 by 2 make 5. What I meant that I do not know whether they use in India the same formula, meaning that perhaps they express it in some other way. You say yourself that Aryabhata gave it designedly wrongly, as far as I could understand what you said. For bless my soul, it gives me a dead aches to try and treat your figures and rows in of cipher and dots with my intuition eye, since I am incapable in making correctly a simple addition of a few figures, that I take them generally on faith. Now you ask me not to mention your name or mention it the least I can. I quote considerably from the source of measures. How can I quote and let out your name? Or how can I quote without quotation marks? You say otherwise make what you like with your manuscripts and letters. How can I, if you won't let me give you credit for what you say? I would like very much to discuss a few points, and I did so in my appendixes, simply saying a Kabbalist, a great mathematician, or a correspondent, a friend, etc., etc. But I am a Dutchman, if people will not recognize Mr. Ronald Skinner from his style. Of course, I would never think of commenting upon your private beliefs expressed in letters or even in your manuscript, nor will I speak of you as a Mason, for you may be humble as a master Mason as you like, or may have never raised your Hiram Abiff, the widow's son, with words as at low breath and other relevant and irrelevant gestures. You know more than all Masonic lodges put together, and I guess if even poor I gave you the strong grip of lion's paw of the tribe of Judas, you would see and find that even I may know something more than your pikes and princes of Wales, bless their dear innocent souls. Your interpretation of 543 and the reverse of the name of Moses, Moshe, is curious. It is the first time I heard it, and it exonerates the writers of the verse of Exodus from a great and ridiculous degradation of their supposed gods. Only believe me, dear Mr. Skinner, that my Brahma, the firstborn, is sacred. Brahma is something more and better than this. Wherever turn your Jehovah, either way, make him male, female, and or bisexual, he will never be better in the Jewish scripture than a phallic number, a Saker and Nekeva blended together. This is just why we worship no more Brahma, single male, than his 7, 9, 10, and 21 Prajapatis, Rishis, Jahans. Call them what you like, his plural aspects in short. But they exist nevertheless. We honor these aspects, but would not more think of praying to them, or mystering, or propitiating them, than the face of Moses on the moon. We recognize them, that's all, and occasionally we feel them. They can help us, but only when the karma permits them to, since they are as much under the inalterable and immutable law of karma as we are ourselves. They, all of them, have been, are, or will be men. No highest malachim become such unless they won their epaulets and spurs on the battlefield of life and terrestrial probation. Masters will be Jahans some day in eternity, and so will you be, and I, and dear Dr. Buck. Only I hope that neither of us will be disgraced with orthodox winds, find ourselves reduced to sit on our tonsils in the absence of something better to sit upon, nor shall we play on golden harps. No, don't be angry with me for what I said of the Jews. I don't like them for the harm they have done the world, their grasping, selfish, hideous egotism. They, the chosen people. Oh, Shadow Lord Buddha. One thing is very suggestive. The most commercial, money-making, grasping nation the world over, the English have chosen the fittest deity they could ever have a member. Fairly God answering marvellously at their sometime their immortal hypocrite character, their beastly sexuality and cant. I'm going to tell it to them in no many words in my SD. You have an admirer through me, one who worships you, Reverend Dr. A. Ayton of Banbury Vicarage Diocese. He is a great Kabbalist, and I had him get your source of measures. Now if you can make out the shrine I attempted to draw with the curly flames around, I will send it to you only how. But if you can make nothing of it, what's the use, unless you keep it as an amulet or a talisman from your humble servant? Only never open it, if you please. Besides, if you do, you would spoil it, and find nothing in it. There is only some akasa in it. Say, why did you labor under the impression that I was lying about masters? Can one lie about living men? And why should I have invented them or still support the invention since for 12 years, and especially for the last 3, I am made a martyr for the truth I've taught? Oh, no woman in her right senses, nor a man either, would go willingly into such hell as I have, and persisted in having spiritualists, Christians, materialists, scientists, and the whole world with 2/3 of our own philosophists to boot against me if I hadn't been forced by my oath and vows to do so. I have lost friends, country, money, and health to serve only manure for the fields of future philosophy. And now that I am alone, abandoned by nearly all, when I am begged and implored by our Hindu philosophers to return to India, the orchid needs me badly. I can't do so because the Anglian Indian government has taken it into its wise head that I am an Russian spy. I have but to say a word to bamboozle the world with the confusion that our masters are spirits, not living men, and I will have the millions of spiritualists turn in my favor. I have but to be a hypocrite and pander to Christians, recognizing and leaving their Jehovah quiet and Jesus alone as a God, and I will make friends of the whole Christian world. The Roman Catholics offer me this day any amount of money I like, if even without believing I turn a Roman Catholic. Shall I listen to them? Better stuff and be hung in India than to lie in anything in this world of lies. May you be happy. Ever yours gratefully, H. B. Blavatsky.